Alright, happy 4th of July weekend, everybody. Anybody that's not watching this during 4th of July weekend, well, never mind. But anyway, sorry it's been so long since I haven't posted a video, but you know, with the COVID going on and all that, things have kind of been I've been kind of trying to lay low. So anyway, I've been in the process of making this video actually for weeks, so hope you guys enjoy it. Alright, so here we have a 1937 Philco. This was sent in by a viewer and a customer of mine for kind of a basically an analysis. Check it out. He bought it from a collector and it was restored, so yeah, we know how that goes sometimes. You know, this one was redone, refinished. Obviously it's way too shiny. I don't know if you can really tell that with the lighting. The faux finish is missing off the front of it. I had one of these radios about 2 years ago and I sold it to a I'll call it a distant family member. We'll put it that way. And kind of regretted doing that, but I got a pretty good price out of it, and it was completely electronically restored. And so I don't have it anymore, but I did have one of these. This is a 37 Philco 37-61. It's not the 610. That's another model. And I actually have one of those that we will be working on. Two different versions of that, as a matter of fact. But this is the 3761. It's just a basic tombstone radio. It's got 2 bands. And these were really well-performing radios back in their time. So, well, even now, these things are pretty, they work really good. So anyway, this one, like I said, has been restored or refinished. Supposedly restored. We'll see. And it's pretty decent in the back. Somebody's put a little wire wound loop antenna, or I don't know if you want to call that a loop antenna, but a coil wrapped in some cardboard. So, you know, these have got a pretty decent speaker in them, and they run off I believe that's an 80 rectifier or 5U3 or 4 or something. Anyway, so anyway, the 5Y4. That's what it is. Anyway, transformer mounted tube. So yeah, pretty decent. So anyway, basically I'm just told to check this one out and see, you know, if it needed anything or what I thought about it. Basically go through it, see if everything was done right on it and all that. Now this radio's already been plugged in by the owner, and so I'm not, you know, I'm not breaking any, you know, cardinal rules about, oh, you should have hooked that up on a Variac, you're gonna burn it up and all that. It's already been plugged in, so if it was going to be burned up, it would have already been fried already. So let's plug it in and see what it does. And I finally got around to getting out here, and after the COVID-19 stuff, finally been able to get out here in the shop and work and all that. I've been taking a break on radios and stuff, mainly because a lot of the part suppliers have been kind of hard to, some of them have been open and some of them haven't. Well, I would say ones that I've run into, most of them haven't. So, and I didn't really want anybody mailing me any germs, and so I've been kind of taking a break on it. But let's go ahead and plug this thing up. See what it does. Got lights. Got a dial pointer or a shadow meter that's kind of crooked on it. don't think I've ever seen that before on these. Power switch and probably tone switch. Let's hook an antenna to it because I don't know if I can pick anything up or not.
You see, when we came to Christ and trusted Him as our Savior,
Pick up the one up the street. That's one of our local stations, but it ain't coming in very good. Let me hook up the external antenna.
like us,
All right.
if you know, the
So we're getting a signal from 1240.
this salvation
Sounds like 1290's back off the air again. Well, there's 970 off in the background.
Back like the big three in a sense.
Yep.
Creation conference.
Well,
Interested audience because it's.
I'm gonna say a little bit on the deaf side. It's working okay, but on the outside antenna, I think it ought to be picking up a little bit better than that. Maybe it needs an alignment. I'll have to pull the schematic and see if it has any alignment instructions.
Source, fossil discovery. So much because.
But I'm not going to jump to conclusions until I take a look. We'll see what we got going on in here. Let me pull the chassis out and see what we're working with. Oh, I see somebody's replaced all the chassis screws with these newer looking Phillips head screws, and it looks like 2 of them match and 2 of them don't. Actually, none of them match really, because that one's a flat and Phillips, and this one's a Phillips, and these are longer than that one, and I guess maybe these 2 match. These 2 are mix match, and none of them are original, so whatever. Anyway, it holds it in there, I reckon. And so I pull the knobs off, and looks like somebody put some new felt washers on there, so that's good. So anyway, let's pull this out and see what we're working with. It looks like somebody's replaced these chassis washers too. They look pretty good. Alright, well, yeah, we definitely got some newer replacement parts in here, but looks like they even installed a fuse in here, which is pretty decent. And it's, it's got a newer newer reproduction, I should say, power cord on it, so that looks like that was installed correctly. Most of this wiring, original wiring, looks pretty good in here. It looks in pretty good shape. And they even took the time to put heat shrink on the capacitors. So far it looks pretty good. I'm kind of surprised that somebody's replaced these. Looks like it's probably a mica cap there, and they replaced that one. And it's got some decent looking filters in here. I'll have to go over the schematic and see how close they match to the original. Now, I know a lot of people in the repair community would have a heart attack over that. Some solder splattered down there. That's a big no-no with some people in the radio restoring community. They would have 2 heart attacks over that, but it happens. It's not a big deal. They're picky people out there, but it looks like somebody's restuffed this capacitor here and run wires out of it. I'm assuming there's a new cap in there. So There's no hum in the receive or any of that. It just seems a little deaf to me. It's not. This radio is a little bit lower end than some of the other ones that I've worked on from this era, so it may not pick up quite as good as some of the other ones. So it could be a normal thing. Somebody's put some heat shrink over this, because a lot of times the little clips and stuff get missing out of these and they start flopping around. So that's not too out of the ordinary. The only thing I could think of is I may need to go through here and check some of these resistors, because it don't look like any of these have been replaced, and well, maybe this one has, and maybe they replaced it with an old one. Because, you know, there's some collectors that, you know, don't like putting modern resistors in a radio. I can kind of understand that, but, you know, I guess if you got an old one that you trust, you know, that's fine. But I don't know, you know, everybody's different and everybody likes everything different. So anyway, I don't see anything that stands out. It looks like from what I can see, most everything in here has been replaced that should be replaced. You know, but I'm gonna go through and spot check some of these resistors and see if any of these are intolerant. So I need to grab a schematic so I can verify what they've got in here is correct to the schematic. Alright, so a lot of people ask me, why don't you pull your micas and check them? For this reason, because when you unless I have a reason to believe that these are out of spec, I don't pull them, because like on this one here, the lead broke apart, but I unwound it, and you know, you're going to end up wrecking the lead or the terminal strip or something. But I did randomly pull this one to check it. It checked perfect, and it ended up snapping the lead, so I had to repair that lead. That's the reason why I don't normally pull them unless I really have a reason to. And with the resistors, usually I'll check them in the circuit, and if something looks abnormal, I'll pull them. This one here is reading pretty. Alright, had a memory card was full again, so I had to go delete some stuff. So now we're back on this radio here. I've got a couple of 1 meg ohm resistors here, right in here. We're going to check these. This is all in the RF section, so that would have to do with sensitivity. That's why I wanted to check all these. And we got one here that's reading a little high. Well, that's wanting to read about 3 meg now, but it didn't a minute ago, so stand by. Well, even with the leads directly up to it, I'm still getting about 3.6 meg. A minute ago I was getting 1.8, so something's a little wacky here. I'm going to go ahead and pull that one out of the circuit, pull one leg up out and check it, see what we get. Alright, so let's see if we can get this in here. With it out of the circuit, if I can get this stupid lead to go in here. We're getting about 1.8, so that's almost double the value of this resistor here, so this one needs to be replaced. Alright, so we got that one replaced, and there's one that's next to it here. I don't know if you can see that, where my lead is going to be pointing right here. An older one up underneath it. I'm going to check the one on the top and the one on the bottom below that one. Let's see if I can get that meter in focus. Or in the shot. It's sideways, but it should give you an idea. Alright, so that's the new one there. That's in the circuit. It's reading right at 1 meg. And the one below it is right here. And it's right at 1 meg. Even though it's 80 years old, it still reads perfect, so we're going to leave that one. Alright, so I think I found our problem with our crooked dial. It was like that, and so just put it there. There's a screw back here that right there, that screw there, that needs to be tightened up so that won't move like that. So we'll get that taken care of.
Lowers your ability to resist. Let's say the MBA BT, and we just saw this.
There's 970. It's coming in pretty good. There's full volume there, so not bad. We'll make sure we don't keep it on there too long, because I don't need no copyright BS. I've already had enough of that garbage already. It looks like this dial is one of those reproductions.
I firmly
Well, I
believe
think it's
in it.
awesome that you do
happen.
it. Linda just texted.
You can see the needle, this thing is falling over as I move it. So that's something that somebody's replaced. Apparently didn't tighten the screws up on it. I should be able to, yeah, I think I can access that screw through that hole right there, so we'll just tighten that down. Alright, so this thing plays on shortwave, but it's definitely not very sensitive. I can get about 3 stations on here, and that's about it. This shortwave band is switch is kind of screwed up. It just rotates and rotates, and there's like 2 other positions on here where you actually get static, and I didn't think it was working for a while, and it's just 1 click straight up and down is AM, and 1 over this way is shortwave, and so we're receiving shortwave, but it's a little on the deaf side. Of course, it's during the daytime, so these upper bands up around 20 meters are open. I'm kind of thinking this is probably about as good as it's going to get.
More than 2 billion euros to the Syrian crisis. The European Union is a shining world.
You can get these Chinese stations. There's one down here, it's the same thing. And that's from Cuba.
Eat bright tomorrow in heaven's brilliance.
Yeah, that's the same one as the one that's up here.
Proved 120. The International Development Association for Indonesia Learning Improvement or Results in Education.
One a little bit below 14 and one a little bit above 14. I don't think that's right, because they're not going to have a broadcast radio station in the amateur band, but maybe it's a little bit above the amateur band. This one's a little bit below it. So anyway, you know, these dials are never really completely accurate on these things anyway. Alright, so I decided to check some voltages before I check the tubes and see if any of these things are in the ballpark. And well, I found a few issues here. We got some low voltages on some tubes here. The voltages on this tube, which is the 6K7, they seem to be normal. 6K7 should have about 270 on the plate. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. So we have about 270 there, and it should be 40 on the screen grid. There's 42, that's fine. But we get over here to the 6Q7, which is in the back here. This is a first audio, second detector tube, And so we want to go 1, 2, 3. This should be 270 volts, I believe. Let me get my bearing here. Let's see, we're in the back of the radio. Yeah, 6Q7. We should have on the plate. We should have 175 volts, as it says right there. And we're getting 104, 105. That's pretty significant drop from what we're supposed to have. And we have this 6A8 up here. On the plate of that one, we're supposed to be getting 220 and let's see if I can find it here. Sorry. Okay, 1, 2, 3. We're supposed to be getting yeah, 220, and we're getting 107 on the plate there. That's quite a bit lower than what we should be getting. We should be getting 90 volts on the screen grid, which is here. We're getting 42 and a half. So we're getting some low voltages in here, and voltages up here on the 6F6 look normal, but on our detector tube and our burst audio second detector, the detectors on both of these detector tubes we're got some low voltage going on, so it could result in some of our DEF problems. And well, my experience is telling me that it's probably a power supply issue, so we need to figure out why we're getting low voltages here. Alright, well, as you can see, I've got some resistor clip lead, some resistors clip leaded in, and our voltage problem, which actually right in here, this is our screen grid voltages, were low, about 40 something. It's supposed to be 90. So I follow that circuit back up here, and our plate voltages, I followed that circuit back up here. Everything kept leading me to the power supply, and I said, let's start checking some of these components in here, which I had checked before, but apparently I missed this big power resistor here. This is supposed to be a 10K, or excuse me, a 9K, but you might as well get a 10 nowadays, because I don't think anybody makes a 9K resistor. Believe it or not, this is only a 2-watt resistor, but you know, in the 1930s they were humongous. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Alright, so this power resistor is supposed to be a 9K resistor, and it's reading 43.8K. So yeah, I think that one's become a little more resistive over time. So I wired in 2.5K, I think these are 8 or 10 watt resistors, in line with the where it was at, and voltages have come way back up. Alright, found a few more that are out of whack over here. Not by much, but they are causing the voltage to drop down a little bit. This one here is supposed to be well, this one, the bigger one's supposed to be a 20K, and it's reading 29 to 30, kind of depending on what temperature is. If I can do this with no hands. See if we can get this meter within viewing range. Alright, this is the big resistor. It's a 20K. It's about 24K. It was dragging the voltage down about 8 volts. like 82 volts. It's supposed to be around 90. So I got something rigged up in there now. It's about 20K. It's like 18 or something, and it's pretty close to 90 volts. This is a 70K. It's reading about 80, so that's got to go. We're gonna replace that one, and hopefully that'll bring our B plus back up on our 6F6 output tube, and the 6K7 IF tube. It's the plate voltage on that's a little low, about 10 volts low. Alright, so I got some resistors, two 5,000 ohm resistors in series, leaded in, and we got this out of tolerance resistor replaced with a temporary resistor. And so far we've gotten these replaced. This 51K is a little bit out, but not really a big deal. This resistor right here, which is a 68K, was a 70K, and it was the original was 70K. It was reading about 80K, so I replaced that. Didn't really affect the B plus a whole lot, but all of our voltages are pretty much back to normal now. So all right, while we're waiting on parts, I'm gonna go ahead and check the tubes. We got a few resistors we gotta order. So this is a 6A8 tube, and it's reading about 650 or so, so that looks okay. Alright, here's our 6Q7, which is the second detector, first audio tube, and it reads about 660. Alright, so the owner of the set sent in a junk radio for parts, and it had this 6Q7 G tube, which is the full-size tube, and it reads about 680. So that's a hair bit better than the other one, and it's also a full-size tube. So I think I'm going to use this one just mainly for the aesthetics part of it. It sits inside of a tube shield, and it's actually a little easier for the wire to reach with the full-size tube because it actually fits the radio. Alright, so here's our 6K7, which is our IF tube. And it's reading about 720, so that's looks real good. Alright, well, this is our 5Y4 rectifier tube. On diode 1, we're getting a little over 700. It's kind of dropping back a little bit. And we move over to 2, and it's a little weaker, coming in about 640, and it's backing up to about 630. Now it's almost back to 620. I don't know about that. That tube maybe a good idea to replace it. It's not real weak, but it's not great either. Well, I didn't notice any audio problems like volume issues, but this tube is almost dead. This is the 6F6 audio output tube. It's about 360 is what it's reading, and 500 is considered borderline. So yeah, I think we're gonna need a new one of these. Alright, so here's a spare 6F6 I've got. It's one of the little short ones, and it reads about 700. It's a whole lot better than the other one was. Alright, so in checking some more components, this one came from there. Alright, good way to cut the camera off. This one came from here, not here. It's a 490K resistor. It's reading 731K, so you know, every time I look I find another resistor way back hidden, and every time I check it it's way out. So maybe I should have just shotgun replaced all these. Alright, I think I've got this thing working a heck of a lot better. I traced some of the problems down to a bad 6K7 tube. Even though these check good, sometimes you can't always believe your tube tester. Now what this thing was doing was, you could, with this tube, you could, which is the one that went bad, you could plug the set in and it would play. And I put this on a local AM broadcast station on 970 and was listening, and about 5 minutes after it warmed up and started playing, it would pop and then the signal would drop down. So something in this tube was going wonky. Monitoring the voltage, you could kind of see it in the voltage. It would drop down a volt or two when it would pop, and the reception would go down. So after replacing this tube with a spare I had around here, it's receiving a lot better and it's not dropping out. And on shortwave I'm able to not get that dropout, so the signal stays up and it's working better.
La situación de derechos humanos a la que se enfrenta. A implementar el convenio 160. Sostenible y justo.
Alright, I thought I'd bring y'all up to speed on what we're doing with the radio. I was out here past midnight trying to get this band switch fixed. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier in the video or what. At this point, this video's been stretched out over a few weeks now, and I can't remember if I mentioned it earlier or not, but this band switch would basically just turn and turn and turn, and it had no stop. It just, you know, it was hard to find. It would just detent around about 8 or 10 times, and you know, you'd end up back where you were. And it's kind of hard to figure out originally where shortwave and broadcast were at on those two clicks. You know, you just, when you're on AM, you click up once clockwise and it gives you the shortwave band, but it took me a little while to figure that out. Anyway, so I wanted to figure out what exactly was wrong with the switch, and doing a little digging, it was apparently clear what was wrong with it. This switch has a little ring, which is right here. I took this part off of this junker set here. Don't worry, I'm not messing up a pristine radio or anything. This thing is a kind of a piece of junk, really. I mean, it's a Philco 3760 in a 3889 case. This tube lineup doesn't even match that chassis, but that chassis fits in there. And the speaker's shot, the chassis is rusty, all the tubes are bad. There's an antenna coil on I think it's that one. It's in there. It's all unstrung, and there's wire all over the place, and that's, you know, crap. So that's not restorable. I'm not even gonna try. So you'd put a lot more money in this thing than it's worth fixing. I mean, the speaker alone would pretty much almost exceed the rest of the radio anyway. So anyway, back to what I was saying. This stop, I call this a stop plate, or a, you know, detent spring stop plate. It's kind of the same thing. It's this black piece here that's blued is a spring that these detent ball bearings right here, if you can see that, there's a ball bearing here and a ball bearing on the opposite side down here, and this plate has a flange on it, which on this one it's broke off. If you could see that right there about where my nail's at there, the flange is broke off of it, and that's a stop flange that stops the switch from going past 2 clicks. You know, it's either AM or shortwave. And so somebody with this switch one time must have wrenched it around with a pair of pliers or something like that and just sheared that stop pin off, or flange off of here, and so the switch just turned and turned, and there was no stop mechanism for it. So I took that switch apart and got the one off and swapped it out and put it in this set, and I'm going to show you what is involved in doing that. I didn't record any of this because there was plenty of swear words. I don't think YouTube would allow that many swear words, and I know y'all don't want to hear it anyway. So there is a lock ring. I don't know if you can see that down in there where my little probe pointer thing I'm using as a pointer is. You have to get that lock ring out, and getting that lock ring out is not easy. But when you get this lock ring out, that allows you to slide the shaft out, because there's nothing else on behind here that stops it from sliding out. There's a little bit of a tension spring here, but that pops right out, and that doesn't actually even stop it from sliding out. But you pull that lock ring out, and that allows you to slide that shaft out. You have to do it carefully so these little wafer switches don't come apart. And I mean, they're held in by these screws, but there's a center rotator that's inside of there. You don't want to get it off track, so you slide that out, and that allows you to slide this ring off. And you have to make sure you've got it. You can only put this on, you know, 2 ways, and you know, so it would be 180 degrees, you know, off if you got it wrong. So you have to make sure the radio is in either shortwave or AM or broadcast band position when you take it apart, and then you know, you make sure that your little flange that sticks down is in the right place. I'm going to try to get you down in here and show you the stop flange. I can't really hold the camera and shine a flashlight down in here, but I'll try to get this light as best as I can. But I'm going to try to get my little probe in here and point out where it's at. I don't know if you can see that. I'm trying to look through the viewfinder, but it looks dark. But let me see if I can get you down in here. Right there, if you can see that bend right there, but it bends over, and there's a little pin here, and then further behind that stops. That little flange right there hits, and it keeps the switch from going too far. It just allows it to click this way and this way, so you can't go any further. Well, that was broken, it just kept turning. So that's what needed to be replaced in that switch, and that was not an easy job. Then after I got done with it, this capacitor here, which is a mica cap, it's basically got a screw in it. Here, I'll show you the old one. It's a little bit easier to see. This is the old capacitor that got flaky. I guess I must have flexed it or moved it too much in trying to get that lock pin out, and it kept losing continuity, and you could you know, push on it and the radio would come back in. And so I guess and this had been out before. I could tell somebody had removed this before and soldered it back in, because the original band leads are not on it. And so I think this thing had been out before. Somebody was monkeying with it and it just didn't quite work right. So I got this capacitor out of that set and put it in here, and everything seems to be okay. I'm gonna have to tidy up my solder joints in here. I just kind of tacked it in to check it, and everything's okay. So we'll go back in and re-secure that a little bit better, and that goes down through a hole there and solders to the bottom of the tuning capacitor, and basically to the body of it, and that's how that mounts in there. And so that, you know, replacing that seemed to correct the problem with the band dropping out. I mean, I was not getting anything with that messed up. So that's where we're at with the set. We're still waiting on these resistors here. This 1 watt resistor here is a dropping resistor for the screen grid voltages on the 6Q8 and the 6K7 tube in here. And I believe I got that tube number right. But anyway, these two, I don't know if you can see that, but that wire ties both of those screen grids together, and this is the voltage feed for it here, and that resistor was off. So we replaced it with a 1 watt, which was what the factory spec was, but that 1 watt seems to be getting a little warm for my liking, so we're going to go ahead and replace that with probably about a 3 watt, just to be on the safe side. Alright, so here's an example of somebody's sloppy booger soldering, is what I call it. They just glop up solder that looks like a booger, and it's supposed to go here, right there, that grounding point goes up here and grounds these capacitors and that wiring circuit right there. Instead of stripping that and wrapping it around and making a good solid connection, they just tacked it on and relied on the tensile strength of the solder to ground that, and that ain't no good. So now the only ground it's got is through the screw. Running an external ground is a good idea, but you need to wrap your wires and all your connections, like I did on this resistor here, all the way around the terminal that or the component or whatever you're soldering to. You need to make a solid connection before you solder it. Wrap it, J-hook it, whatever you got to do to make a good connection, and then you just use the solder to hold it on there and keep it from moving around, not for the mechanical connection itself. That's what I'm talking about right there. Make your connection, and then all this needs right now is a little bit of solder. Make your connections, wrap them around, and solder them. And there, that's better. Alright, these are the new tubes that we've ordered to replace the old tubes. This is the 6K7, which is a IF tube pretty much, and the other one was dropping out. You could sit there and listen to the radio, and about 5 minutes after it warmed up, it just drop out. Not completely, but it would drop back. So anyway, this one tests really good. About 800. These are from Antique Electronic Supply. Alright, here's our 6Q7, which is our RF tube basically. Alright, checked just fine. It's about 640. Alright, and a 6F6 audio output tube. My tube was a smaller glass tube. The one that was in the set was a bigger glass tube, but it was weak. This one checked real strong. 860 out of 1,000, so very good tube.
This local news brief has been brought to you by Southeast Insurance, now located on Market Street in downtown Camden. and by Bakerfield Electric Cooperative Security Services for peace of mind at a price you can afford. This is Johnny Deal. Don't forget to wash your hands and cover your cough and sneeze. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Enjoy this weather. Thank you for listening, and sports is up next.
This local sports brief is brought to you by Jet Pools and Dusty Bing, your #1 pool supply store, 1-803-432-6915. Major League Baseball finally returns. More on this story after this.
Carolina Country Classics, FM 98.7, AM 1590, WCAM.
Alright, so as you saw a minute ago, the tubes came in. All the new tubes. And so I had my tubes in there, but the owner of this set wanted the full-size glass tubes. So all those came in, we checked those, they all look good, and this last resistor was one I was waiting on. The original one was a 1-watt resistor, 20K. We replaced it with a 3-watt 20K. The one that was in here was a replacement from the original dog bone, and then so this is will be the third replacement. This was a 3-watt 9K, and we replaced it with a 5-watt 9K. So that one's done, and all the other resistors, I found quite a few in here that were out of spec tolerance, and we replaced all those. So this over here was a 56K 1-watt. The one that was in there was not really out of spec, but we were in here, so I replaced that one anyway with a newer metal oxide. So we're pretty much done component wise with this set. Seems to be receiving pretty well, and I fixed the band switch, and so we're about ready to wrap this one up and slide it back in the case. And the owner supplied these new isolation washers, I guess you want to call them. The ones on the sub chassis here have already been replaced, so there's one back here, and then there's one on each side, and those have been replaced already by the previous owner. So those are in good shape, so we're pretty much done with this set. Alright, we got it all back in the cabinet, and looks like everything's working okay. We'll do a band scan on this thing and show you it's working pretty good, but I don't know, the shortwave's probably not going to be all that great because it's during the daytime, and around here we don't really pick up a whole lot during the daytime, but we'll run through it and give you an idea of what it's performing like anyway. This station right here is WPJK, and they play, it's supposed to be a Christian format, but they play a lot of older classic music. It's what, 1580. I don't want to leave it in one spot too long. They'll try to ding me for copyright.
So now it's going to be strategic of how they do it. But yeah, I mean, I'll be at DJ Ham's house.
It's 1700.
More of the best of the Sean Hannity Show. Stay tuned.
Typical summertime, you get a lot of lightning strikes in the radio, even though there's not really any storms close by that I know of.
Educating yourself about your flu vaccine options is important. It's also really easy. So ask about your vaccine options, because if you're a tough guy like me...
That brought the wolves to us are on the way out. Promo code Hannity. So remember.
Country station.
Safety Administration and the of the Columbia, South Carolina, filters of time and fiber.
There's 970 blaring in.
Of this process and the game, and that's frustrating.
Sports talk radio. Dial does seem to hang up right around 900 a little bit.
It's not intended to be punitive. Instead, we just need everyone to do their... Kelly Ann. Right. Well, to the League of the Fourth, we've already profiled the Committee of Five. The 5 men of the Second Continental Congress appointed to create our Declaration of Independence from Great Britain. We're looking.
Up the shortwave. The switch only flips two positions now like it's supposed to. Music station. Looks like FT8 on 40 meters. Can't leave it there and get copyright ding.
Time he will show up, and his timing is always
More preaching.
You know, sometimes like
Plenty of that on shortwave.
Longo de todo o mês de junho, alinhada à iniciativa global proposta pela Organização Internacional do Trabalho, a OIT, a campanha também conta.
Spanish. Another copyrighted song.
El Centro de Investigaciones Científicas de la Defensa Civil presenta
no Brasil atinge mais de 2 milhões de meninos e meninas entre 5 e 17 anos. Segundo Ana Maria Vila Real,
permite caracterizar las cepas circulantes del sarcófago. Lo más bermejo.
experiencia acumulada en el tratamiento de la enfermedad.
More Spanish. More Spanish.
Minuto 28.
Something coming in there, but it's pretty weak. And that's about it for the shortwave band. And during the daytime, it's not really a whole lot, but anyway, works pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. It works a lot better on shortwave at nighttime, but it's, I don't know, what, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
The doctor, God, or the president.
So,
Confused.
well, there's our 1937 Philco 37-61. Got it working pretty good, and hopefully it gets enjoyed for many more years to come. Thank you for watching.